The delicate lace of my wedding dress felt like a shroud, not a celebration, as I stared at the crumpled, official-looking letter in my trembling hand. Wedding canceled. 2 weeks. 2 weeks until forever became never. Not by Michael, my fiancé, but by his mother, Eleanor Vance, who declared me not good enough. Her words, delivered with chilling precision, still echoed, "Michael needs someone of substance, someone like us." The humiliation burned hotter than any fury. My dream, my future, reduced to a cold, clinical dismissal. But as the tears streamed, a dangerous whisper ignited. What if I could take it all back? This isn't just my story. It's a testament to what happens when a woman pushed to the brink decides to rewrite her own ending. And trust me, you'll want to see how this one unfolds. So hit that subscribe button because you won't believe what I did next. 3 years ago, my life was a meticulously crafted dream. Michael and I met in a bustling downtown cafe, a chance encounter over spilled lattes and shared laughter. He was charming, attentive, and beneath his polished exterior, I saw a kindness that drew me in. He was an emerging architect, already making a name for himself, and I was a graphic designer, pouring my soul into my small, growing business. Our worlds, though different, seemed to perfectly interlace. We spent evenings walking through the city, planning our future, a future filled with cozy apartments, late-night talks, and the quiet comfort of simply existing together. When he proposed, it was on a rainy Tuesday evening, in our tiny apartment kitchen, with a simple silver band and a voice thick with emotion. It wasn't grand, but it was real, and that was everything to me. We set the date for late spring, choosing the Rosewood Estate, a breathtakingly exclusive venue nestled in rolling hills, a place of refined elegance and whispered luxury. Eleanor had insisted on the Rosewood. "Only the best for my Michael," she'd declared, her eyes sweeping over me as if measuring my inadequacy against the opulent surroundings. Michael, ever the peacemaker, would just squeeze my hand and offer a reassuring smile. But even then, a shadow lingered. Eleanor Vance, Michael's mother, was a force of nature. She was a woman who commanded attention, whose presence filled a room, whose opinions were absolute. From the moment Michael introduced us, I felt her scrutinizing gaze, a silent assessment of my worthiness. She wasn't overtly cruel at first, just subtly dismissive, her compliments laced with backhanded remarks. "Ilara is creative," she'd say, as if creativity was a quaint hobby rather than my life's work. Or, "You're so down to earth, dear," a phrase that always felt like a thinly veiled insult about my lack of sophistication. Michael, bless his heart, seemed oblivious. He adored his mother, saw her as a strong, protective figure. I tried to see her through his eyes, to understand her possessiveness as a form of love. But as the wedding planning intensified, so did her control. She micromanaged every detail, from the floral arrangements to the guest list, often overriding my choices with a dismissive wave of her perfectly manicured hand. "Trust me, dear," she'd say. "I know what's best for Michael." I'd try to voice my opinions, but Michael would always step in, smoothing things over, urging me to compromise. "It's just easier, love," he'd whisper. "She means well." I wanted to believe him, I truly did, but the quiet compromises began to chip away at my spirit, leaving me feeling like an accessory to my own wedding. The final straw came 2 weeks before the date. The invitations had been sent, the final payments made, the dress hanging in my closet, a luminous promise of forever. I was at the Rosewood Estate, meeting with the coordinator, finalizing the last details when Eleanor arrived, unannounced. She dismissed the coordinator with a curt nod, her eyes fixed on me. Her expression was devoid of warmth, cold and hard as granite. She didn't sit. She stood, tall and imposing, casting a long shadow over me. "Ilara," she began, her voice low and deliberate. "We need to talk about the wedding." My heart pounded. I knew. I felt it in my bones. "Michael won't be joining us," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "He's indisposed. He sends his regrets." She paused, letting the words hang in the air like a guillotine blade. "I've decided to call off the wedding." The world tilted. The opulent ballroom, the glittering chandeliers, the meticulously arranged floral displays, all spun around me. My mouth went dry. "What?" I managed, my voice a pathetic whisper. "Why?" Eleanor sighed, an exaggerated, theatrical exhalation. "Honestly, Alara, you're just not suitable. You lack ambition, drive. You're a lovely girl, yes, but Michael is destined for greatness. He needs a partner who can navigate his world, someone who understands the intricacies of wealth and power, not someone who designs logos from a home office." Her words were a torrent of ice, freezing me from the inside out. She spoke of my family, my upbringing, my aspirations, dissecting every aspect of my life and finding it wanting. She didn't just call off the wedding. She dissected my very being, piece by agonizing piece. Michael, the man who swore to love me forever, was nowhere to be found, hiding behind his mother's cruelty. His silence was a betrayal far deeper than any words. He wasn't indisposed. He was a coward, allowing his mother to do his dirty work. I stood there, tears streaming down my face, utterly humiliated, utterly broken. "And the rosewood," Eleanor added, almost as an afterthought, a cruel flourish to her masterpiece of destruction, "will simply have to be rebooked for a more appropriate occasion. Michael has already agreed." She turned to leave, her back ramrod straight, leaving me drowning in the wreckage of my shattered dreams. The coordinator, pale and apologetic, offered me a glass of water, but as I stared at the elegant, untouched wedding cake, a single, potent thought cut through my despair. The rosewood, their symbol of status, their perfect venue. And then, a flicker of something new, something sharp and dangerous, ignited within me. An idea, so audacious, so utterly unthinkable it was almost brilliant. What if the rosewood wasn't theirs? What if it was mine? I left the Rosewood estate that day not with tears of sorrow, but with the cold fire of a new, desperate resolve burning in my gut. The humiliation was a crucible, forging a resolve I didn't know I possessed. Eleanor Vance thought she could simply erase me, discard me like a broken toy, but she had made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated the fury of a woman scorned, a woman who had nothing left to lose. I spent the next 24 hours in a blur, fueled by coffee and a potent cocktail of grief and vengeance. My apartment, once a sanctuary of shared laughter, now felt like a tomb. I paced, I typed, I researched. The Rosewood estate wasn't just a venue. It was a symbol, a monument to Eleanor's control and Michael's complicity. If I could take that from them, if I could turn their symbol of status into my instrument of defiance, then maybe, just maybe, I could reclaim a piece of myself. The idea was simple, yet utterly insane. I would buy the Rosewood estate. The logistics were a nightmare. The estate was a sprawling, multi-million-dollar property, a jewel in the crown of the local real estate market. My savings, built carefully over years, were substantial, but they were nowhere near enough. I had a small nest egg, an emergency fund, and the proceeds from my graphic design business. But this was a different league. I opened every financial statement, every investment account. I called my bank, my financial advisor, anyone who would listen, pitching my insane idea with a frantic urgency that probably sounded unhinged. They all looked at me like I was crazy. Ms. Hayes, my bank manager, a portly man named Mr. Henderson, said kindly, "This is a significant undertaking, and given the timeline, 2 weeks, it's simply not feasible." His words only strengthened my resolve. Feasible? I wasn't looking for feasible. I was looking for impossible. I started liquidating everything I could. My small investment portfolio, a mutual fund I'd been building for retirement, even some of the more valuable design equipment I owned. It was a desperate, all-or-nothing gamble. I found a local real estate agent, a sharp-witted woman named Brenda, who listened to my story with a raised eyebrow but a glimmer of intrigue in her eyes. "It's highly unusual," she admitted, "to close on a property of this magnitude in such a short time frame, especially without a clear purpose beyond what you've described." I laid out my plan, stripped of emotion, presenting it as a cold, calculated business decision. "I want to purchase the Rosewood estate," I told her, "and I want to do it before Michael Vance and his mother can reschedule their event." Brenda, to her credit, didn't flinch. She saw the fire in my eyes, the steel beneath the shattered facade. She saw a challenge. "It'll be difficult," she said, but not impossible. You'll need cash and lots of it, and you'll need to move fast, very fast. We worked tirelessly. Days blurred into nights. Brenda made calls, pulled strings, navigated. I left the Rosewood estate that day, not with tears of sorrow, but with the cold fire of a new, desperate resolve burning in my gut. The humiliation was a crucible, forging a strength I didn't know I possessed. Eleanor Vance thought she could simply erase me, discard me like a broken toy. But she had made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated the fury of a woman scorned, a woman who had nothing left to lose. I spent the next 24 hours in a blur, fueled by coffee and a potent cocktail of grief and vengeance. My apartment, once a sanctuary of shared laughter, now felt like a tomb. I paced, I typed, I researched. The Rosewood estate wasn't just a venue. It was a symbol, a monument to Eleanor's control and Michael's complicity. If I could take that from them, if I could turn their symbol of status into my instrument of defiance, then maybe, just maybe, I could reclaim a piece of myself. The idea was simple, yet utterly insane. I would buy the Rosewood estate. The logistics were a nightmare. The estate was a sprawling, multi-million-dollar property, a jewel in the crown of the local real estate market. My savings, built carefully over years, were substantial, but they were nowhere near enough. I had a small nest egg, an emergency fund, and the proceeds from my graphic design business. But this was a different league. I opened every financial statement, every investment account. I called my bank, my financial advisor, anyone who would listen, pitching my insane idea with a frantic urgency that probably sounded unhinged. They all looked at me like I was crazy. Ms. Hayes, my bank manager, a portly man named Mr. Henderson, said kindly, "This is a significant undertaking, and given the timeline, 2 weeks, it's simply not feasible." His words only strengthened my resolve. Feasible? I wasn't looking for feasible. I was looking for impossible. I started liquidating everything I could. My small investment portfolio, a mutual fund I'd been building for retirement, even some of the more valuable design equipment I owned. It was a desperate, all-or-nothing gamble. I found a local real estate agent, a sharp-witted woman named Brenda, who listened to my story with a raised eyebrow but a glimmer of intrigue in her eyes. "It's highly unusual," she admitted, "to close on a property of this magnitude in such a short time frame, especially without a clear purpose beyond what you've described." I laid out my plan, stripped of emotion, presenting it as a cold, calculated business decision. "I want to purchase the Rosewood estate," I told her, "and I want to do it before Michael Vance and his mother can reschedule their event." Brenda, to her credit, didn't flinch. She saw the fire in my eyes, the steel beneath the shattered facade. She saw a challenge. "It'll be difficult," she said, "but not impossible. You'll need cash and lots of it, and you'll need to move fast, very fast." We worked tirelessly. Days blurred into nights. Brenda made calls, pulled strings, navigated the labyrinthine world of high-stakes real estate transactions. I signed documents, transferred funds, watched my life savings dwindle to a precarious balance, all for a property I would own for pure, unadulterated revenge. The current owners of the Rosewood, a wealthy family looking to retire, were surprised by the sudden, aggressive offer, but the all-cash proposal and the tight deadline appealed to them. They wanted a quick, clean sale. We were a week out from the original wedding date. The pressure was immense. Every phone call, every email, every signature felt like a ticking bomb. What if Eleanor found out? What if Michael, for once, decided to grow a spine and intervened? The thought of failure was a cold dread in my stomach, worse even than the initial humiliation. If this didn't work, I'd be left with nothing. No fiancé, no wedding, no savings, and a public spectacle of my own making. The day the papers were signed felt surreal. I sat in Brenda's office, my hand trembling slightly as I scrawled my signature on the last document. The Rosewood estate was mine. The keys, heavy and cold in my palm, felt like a weapon I had paid for with every cent I had. The triumph was immediate, a rush of pure, unadulterated power, but beneath it, a strange hollowness. I had achieved my impossible goal, but what now? The wedding was still less than a week away. I knew Eleanor would be there, making final preparations, basking in her twisted victory. I had to deliver the final blow myself. I chose the morning of what would have been my wedding rehearsal. I dressed carefully, not in black, but in a simple, elegant ivory dress, a silent reclaiming of the color they had tried to steal from me. I wore no makeup, letting my pale face and determined eyes speak for themselves. My heart hammered against my ribs, a drumbeat of anticipation and dread. This wasn't just revenge. It was an exorcism. I arrived at the Rosewood estate, the familiar winding driveway now feeling different, imbued with a new, dangerous power. Eleanor's luxury sedan was already parked in front, her driver waiting patiently. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. This was it. I took a deep breath, the scent of fresh-cut flowers from the gardens filling the air, a cruel reminder of what I had lost. I walked through the grand entrance, my footsteps echoing in the opulent foyer. The staff, recognizing me, looked confused, then wary. I spotted Eleanor and Michael in the main ballroom, deep in conversation with a new event planner. Eleanor, in a sharp red suit, gesticulated wildly, her voice carrying across the vast space. Michael, ever passive, nodded along, his shoulders slightly slumped. They looked exactly as I had imagined, smug, self-satisfied, completely oblivious. I walked towards them, each step deliberate, a silent countdown to detonation. Eleanor looked up first, her eyes narrowing as she recognized me, a flicker of annoyance, then a condescending smile. "Ilara," she purred, her voice dripping with false concern. "I'm surprised to see you here. I thought you'd be recuperating." Michael turned, his face blanching as he saw me. He tried to offer a weak smile, a gesture of apology that came too late. I ignored him, my gaze fixed on Eleanor. "I'm here for a very specific reason, Eleanor," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor in my hands. I reached into my bag and pulled out the crisp, official-looking document. It was the cancellation notice, typed on my newly acquired letterhead for the Rosewood estate. "I'm here to personally inform you that your reservation for this venue, for any future event, including Michael's rescheduled wedding, has been canceled." Eleanor's smile faltered, her eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about?" She scoffed, her voice rising. "Don't be ridiculous. The Rosewood is ours for Michael's wedding. We have a contract." "You had a contract," I corrected, stepping closer, holding out the document. "But that contract is now null and void, effective immediately." Her eyes flicked to the paper, then back to my face, a slow dawning of disbelief creeping into her expression. "And why, pray tell, is that?" she demanded, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Because," I said, my voice clear and strong, a sudden surge of power coursing through me. "I bought the Rosewood estate. It's mine now." The words hung in the air, a deafening silence falling over the ballroom. Eleanor's face, usually so composed, contorted in a mask of shock and outrage. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Michael, who had been standing frozen beside her, finally stirred. "Ilara, what are you saying?" he stammered, his eyes wide with disbelief. I turned to him, my gaze cold. "I'm saying, Michael, that your mother's perfect son won't be getting married in his mother's perfect venue. Not here, anyway." I watched as Eleanor's face turned a dangerous shade of red, her carefully constructed composure shattering. She lunged forward, snatching the document from my hand, her eyes scanning the official seals, the signature. "This is impossible," she shrieked, her voice echoing through the opulent space. "You can't do this. We have a signed agreement. The new owner has the right to terminate any existing agreements with appropriate notice and compensation," I stated calmly, reciting the legal clause I had memorized, "which has been provided. All deposits will be refunded, of course." Her hands trembled, crumpling the paper. You spiteful little witch," she spat, her voice cracking with fury. "You spent all your money on this pathetic revenge? I'm saying, Michael, that your mother's perfect son won't be getting married in his mother's perfect venue. Not here, anyway." I watched as Eleanor's face turned a dangerous shade of red, her carefully constructed composure shattering. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish out of water. Michael, who had been standing frozen beside her, finally stirred. "Alara, what are you saying?" he stammered, his eyes wide with disbelief, as if the words had just registered. I turned to him, my gaze cold. "I'm saying, Michael, that your mother's perfect son won't be getting married in his mother's perfect venue. Not here, anyway." Eleanor lunged forward, snatching the document from my hand, her eyes scanning the official seals, the signature. Her fingers tore at the crisp paper. "This is impossible," she shrieked, her voice echoing through the opulent space, now devoid of background music, every word magnified. "You can't do this. We have a contract." "You had a contract," I corrected, stepping closer, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor in my hands. "But that contract is now null and void, effective immediately." I paused, letting the words sink in. "The new owner has the right to terminate any existing agreements with appropriate notice and compensation." I recited the legal clause I had memorized, the words feeling like a shield, "which has been provided. All deposits will be refunded, of course." Her hands trembled, crumpling the paper into a tight ball. Her eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, were now wide with pure, incandescent fury. You spiteful little witch!" she spat, her voice cracking with rage. "You spent all your money on this pathetic revenge?" I met her gaze, no longer feeling the sting of her words, only a quiet, resolute strength. "No, Eleanor," I said, my voice steady. "I spent my money on reclaiming my dignity, and on ensuring that you, for once, don't get exactly what you want." Michael finally found his voice, a whimper of desperation. "Alara, please, this is insane. We can talk about this. My mother, she just wants what's best." He stepped forward, a hand outstretched, as if to calm a wild animal. I laughed, a short, bitter sound that held no humor. "What's best for her, Michael, not for you, and certainly not for me." I looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not the man I loved, but a weak, indecisive boy. The love I had felt for him, once so vibrant, shriveled and died in that moment, replaced by a profound emptiness. He was not the man I thought he was. He was just a reflection of his mother's will. Eleanor, sputtering with rage, tried to rally the event planner, a nervous young woman who had been standing wide-eyed at the edge of the scene. "Call the police. Call my lawyer. This woman is trespassing." But the planner, sensing the irreversible shift in power, backed away awkwardly, her eyes darting between Eleanor's furious face and my calm, unwavering stance. "This is my property now, Eleanor," I said, my voice firm, cutting through her increasingly frantic accusations, "and I'm asking you to leave." She stood there, frozen, her face a mask of incandescent fury, but there was nowhere for her to go, no argument left to make, no power left to wield. She had been stripped bare, just as she had stripped me. Her elaborate plans, her carefully constructed image of control, all crumbled before her. Michael, looking utterly defeated, his shoulders slumped, put a hand on his mother's arm, urging her away. She glared at me one last time, a look of pure hatred that promised future retribution, before allowing him to lead her out of the ballroom, her heels clicking angrily on the marble floor, the sound echoing like a retreat. And then silence. The grand ballroom, moments ago filled with the echoes of Eleanor's fury, was now eerily quiet. The tension, thick and suffocating only moments before, dissipated, leaving behind a strange, unsettling stillness. I stood alone, surrounded by the opulent decorations meant for their wedding, the towering floral arrangements, the pristine white linens draped over tables, the glittering chandeliers casting a soft glow on the polished dance floor. The scent of lilies and fresh linen filled the air, a cruel reminder of what I had lost, what had been stolen, and what I had so violently reclaimed. The initial rush of triumph began to fade, replaced by a strange, profound hollowness. I had won. I had exacted my revenge. The satisfaction was there, a sharp, momentary burst of vindication. But what now? I was the sole owner of a sprawling, expensive wedding venue, a place that now felt like a mausoleum of my lost dreams, a monument to a love that had failed and a family that had betrayed. The weight of the keys in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy, not like a weapon, but like a colossal burden. I had poured every last cent, every ounce of my emotional energy into this audacious act of defiance, and now I was financially depleted, emotionally exhausted, and utterly alone in a monument to my own pain. The silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning and the distant chirping of birds outside. I walked slowly through the deserted ballroom, my fingers tracing the delicate embroidery on the chair covers, the cool, smooth surface of the polished dance floor. Every detail, every expensive flourish, was a reminder of the future that had been stolen from me, the dream I had so desperately clung to. I had burned the bridge, yes, but now I stood on the ashes, and the view was desolate. The revenge was complete, but it didn't fill the void. It only created a new one, larger and more demanding. What was I going to do with the Rosewood estate? Sell it? But who would buy it so quickly? Especially after the public spectacle I had just created. The whispers would spread like wildfire. Keep it? How would I manage it? Staff it? Make it profitable? The thought was overwhelming. My initial plan had ended with the confrontation. I hadn't thought beyond the revenge itself, the act of taking back control, and now the daunting reality of my impulsive, drastic action settled over me like a shroud. I walked out onto the manicured lawns, the setting sun beginning to cast long shadows across the perfectly trimmed hedges and blooming flower beds. The air was cool, carrying the scent of blooming roses, ironically. It was a beautiful place, undeniably, but it was also a place of heartbreak, a monument to a love that had failed and a family that had betrayed. I sat on a stone bench near a bubbling fountain, watching the last rays of sunlight fade from the sky, painting the clouds in hues of orange and purple. The phone in my pocket buzzed, probably Brenda, wondering about the aftermath, or perhaps the venue manager. Confused by the sudden drama, I ignored it. I needed to breathe. I needed to think. I had taken back control, yes, but at what cost? Had I simply traded one form of pain for another, larger one? The future stretched before me, vast and uncertain, filled with the echoes of a victory that felt strangely hollow, leaving me with an expensive, empty shell and no clear path forward. The days that followed were a blur of intense, unsettling quiet. The initial adrenaline of the confrontation wore off, leaving me feeling raw and exposed. Brenda, my real estate agent turned reluctant confidant, tried to help. "We can list it immediately," she suggested gently. "Cut your losses. There are other venues." But the thought of selling the Rosewood, of letting it go, felt like another defeat. I had fought so hard, sacrificed so much, just to acquire it. To give it up now would be to admit Eleanor had truly won, that my grand gesture was nothing more than an empty, expensive tantrum. I spent hours wandering the empty halls of the estate, the silence amplifying my anxieties. The place was magnificent, but it was also a financial drain. Staff needed to be paid, maintenance was constant, and without bookings, I was bleeding money. My remaining funds were dwindling fast. The local whispers, fueled by Eleanor's undoubtedly dramatic version of events, didn't help. I was the crazy ex-fiancé who bought a wedding venue out of spite. My graphic design clients, sensing the chaos, began to pull away. I was losing everything, again. One afternoon, as I sat in the grand ballroom, sketching aimlessly in my notebook, a thought, small but persistent, began to form. What if the Rosewood wasn't just a wedding venue? What if it could be something more, something different, something mine, in a way that truly reflected me, not just my pain? I started researching event spaces, community centers, arts venues. I looked at the vast grounds, the multiple buildings, the potential. It was daunting, but for the first time since the confrontation I felt a flicker of something beyond despair. Purpose. My first step was to find an architect, someone who could see beyond the traditional wedding venue, someone who understood vision, not just blueprints. I pored over portfolios, looking for a blend of creativity and practicality. That's how I found Liam Thorne. His firm specialized in adaptive reuse, transforming old spaces into new, vibrant community hubs. His work was understated, elegant, and deeply thoughtful. Our first meeting was at the Rosewood. He walked through the ballroom, his gaze lingering on the intricate details, but also seeing the bones of the building, its untapped potential. He listened patiently as I, a woman still raw from a public humiliation, stammered through my half-formed ideas. I told him about the wedding, about Eleanor, about the desperate act of buying the venue. He didn't flinch, didn't judge. He simply listened, his eyes kind, his expression empathetic. "It's a beautiful space, Alara," he said, his voice calm and steady. "It has good bones, but a space is just a shell. It's the life you breathe into it that truly matters." He proposed a radical idea: transform the Rosewood into a multi-purpose event center. Not just weddings, but corporate retreats, art exhibitions, charity galas, even a community garden. An inclusive space, open to all, rather than an exclusive fortress. His vision resonated deeply with me. It was everything Eleanor's world wasn't. We began immediately. The initial phase was all about assessment. Liam brought in engineers and contractors. They crawled through the attics, descended into the cellars, tapped walls, and examined every inch of the sprawling property. I walked beside them, a notebook in hand, asking questions, learning the language of structural integrity and zoning permits. The financial pressure was relentless. Every inspection, every consultation added to the mounting costs. I had to make difficult decisions, selling off more of my remaining personal assets, canceling subscriptions, living on the bare minimum. My graphic design work became a frantic scramble to make ends meet, taking on any project, no matter how small or uninspiring. Liam, always observant, noticed my strained budget. He never offered charity, but he found ways to optimize, to suggest phased renovations, to connect me with suppliers who offered better rates. He treated me as a professional, a partner in this daunting undertaking, not as a victim or a client in distress. His respect was a quiet balm to my bruised ego. We spent long days at the estate, discussing layouts, materials, and potential uses for each room. I found myself drawn to his quiet competence, the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the patient explanations he offered for complex architectural concepts. He saw the potential not just in the building, but in me. He challenged my assumptions, pushed me to think bigger, but always with a gentle encouragement that made me feel capable, not criticized. The first major hurdle hit us hard. During a structural inspection of the main ballroom ceiling, a section of decorative plaster crumbled, revealing extensive water damage from a long-forgotten leak in the roof. "It's worse than we thought," Liam said, his voice grim as he pointed to the dark, moldy beams. "This isn't just a patch job. We're looking at a full roof replacement on this wing and significant structural reinforcement. It's going to be expensive, very expensive." My heart sank. This was the kind of setback that could derail everything. I had barely enough to cover the planned renovations, let alone a catastrophic structural issue. The initial surge of purposeful energy drained from me, replaced by a familiar, crushing despair. "I don't know if I can afford this, Liam," I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. "I've already poured everything I have into this place. There's nothing left." He didn't offer empty platitudes. He simply looked at me, his eyes steady. "Then we find a way, Alara," he said, his voice firm. "We reevaluate the budget, we look for alternative materials, we apply for grants. We don't quit, not now, not when you've already come this far." His words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the brink of giving up. He spent the next 2 days recalculating, exploring options, making calls, not just as my architect, but as someone genuinely invested in my success. He presented me with a revised plan. Leaner, more efficient, but still ambitious. It meant more sacrifices, more risk, but it also meant moving forward. "It's a gamble," he admitted, "but it's a calculated one, and I believe in this space. More importantly," he paused, his gaze meeting mine, "I believe in you." The weight of his words, his unwavering faith, was almost as daunting as the financial burden itself. I had never had anyone believe in me like that, not truly, not even Michael. I swallowed hard. "Okay," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "Let's do it." The roof project began, a messy, noisy, expensive undertaking. We spent hours on site, making critical decisions on the fly. One afternoon, a sudden, torrential downpour threatened to flood the exposed ballroom. Liam, without hesitation, grabbed tarps and helped the crew secure the opening. Soaked to the bone but laughing as he worked, I watched him, truly watched him, and saw a man who wasn't afraid of hard work, or of getting his hands dirty, or of facing unexpected challenges head-on. A man who saw problems as puzzles to be solved, not reasons to give up. The initial professional boundary between us began to blur, replaced by a shared sense of camaraderie, a quiet understanding that deepened with every nail hammered, every beam replaced, every obstacle overcome. I saw his kindness, his resilience, his unwavering commitment, and something new, something gentle and unexpected, began to bloom in the ashes of my old life. But the financial strain remained a constant gnawing fear, a specter lurking in the background. As the new roof finally took shape, another problem arose. This one, legal. A historical preservation society, alerted by anonymous complaints, almost certainly Eleanor, filed an injunction, claiming our planned exterior changes violated local heritage guidelines, threatening to halt the entire renovation indefinitely. The injunction landed like a physical blow, a final, spiteful jab from Eleanor. The Historical Preservation Society, no doubt tipped off by her, claimed our new roof and planned exterior changes violated heritage guidelines. Construction halted. The carefully calculated timeline, already tight, crumbled. Liam, usually so calm, ran a hand through his hair, a rare sign of frustration. "She's playing dirty," he stated, his voice tight. This could delay us for months, even years in court. My heart sank. Months of financial bleeding, of uncertainty. I could feel the familiar despair creeping back, threatening to engulf me. "No," I said, the word surprisingly firm. "We fight it. We don't give her the satisfaction." We started by gathering every document, every original blueprint, every historical record of the Rosewood estate. Liam, with his architectural expertise, became my general. He spent hours poring over old maps, identifying the original materials, proving our proposed changes were either reversible or aligned with the building's historical evolution. He also found a crucial loophole. The Society's guidelines focused on structural integrity and visible historical features. Our roof was not visible from the main road, and our internal renovations were entirely exempt. We scheduled a meeting with the Society's board, Liam advising me to present our case not as a defense, but as a vision. Show them how this venue can serve the community, how it can preserve history by living, he urged. The day of the meeting, I dressed simply, professionally. Liam was by my side, a steady, reassuring presence. We walked into a room full of stern faces. I presented our plans, not just the architectural drawings, but the community programs, the charity events we envisioned, the local artists we planned to feature. I spoke passionately about breathing new life into old bones, about creating a legacy of inclusivity. Liam interjected with technical details, countering every one of their legal arguments with precision. When the Society's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman who clearly had Eleanor's brief, brought up public perception and the spirit of preservation, Liam calmly presented photographs of other historical properties his firm had revitalized, showing how modern adaptation could honor the past. It was a tense, hour-long battle, but we won. The injunction was lifted, with a few minor concessions on material choices that didn't impact our core vision. As we walked out, Liam clapped me on the shoulder. "You were incredible, Ilara. You owned that room." His pride in my strength felt more validating than any revenge. Construction resumed with renewed vigor. The incident with the Society had forged an even stronger bond between Liam and me. He was there every day, not just as an architect but as a partner. We shared late-night takeout amidst sawdust and blueprints, debating color palettes, laughing over unforeseen plumbing issues. He didn't just listen to my ideas, he amplified them. Saw the potential I sometimes missed. I watched him interact with the construction crew, patient and respectful, always finding a solution. It was a stark contrast to Michael's deferential silence, to Eleanor's demanding pronouncements. Liam saw me, truly saw me, not as a victim or a project, but as a capable, resilient woman. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day. We sat on the newly installed patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues. He reached for my hand, his touch gentle, tentative. "You know," he said, his voice quiet, "I've watched you turn this place, and yourself, into something extraordinary." He didn't say anything more, but his eyes held a depth of understanding that spoke volumes. I didn't pull away. I leaned into his touch, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the setting sun. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was a slow, steady bloom, built on shared purpose and mutual respect. The grand reopening of the Rosewood estate was set for a crisp autumn evening. We had transformed the ballroom into a versatile event space, complete with state-of-the-art acoustics and lighting. The former gardens now featured accessible pathways and a vibrant community art installation. Local businesses filled the vendor booths, showcasing their crafts and culinary delights. People flocked in, drawn by curiosity and the promise of a revitalized landmark. The air buzzed with laughter, live music, and the clinking of glasses. I walked through the crowds, a genuine smile on my face, greeting guests, answering questions. The whispers of the crazy ex-fiancé had faded, replaced by genuine admiration for the transformation. I saw Brenda, my real estate agent, beaming with pride. "You did it, Alara," she whispered, squeezing my arm. "You truly did it." Liam stood by the entrance, his eyes meeting mine across the bustling room. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of all we had accomplished. It wasn't just a venue reopening, it was a rebirth. Months later, the Rosewood estate thrived. It hosted everything from intimate weddings that celebrated unique love stories, to bustling charity galas, to quiet art exhibitions. It was a place of joy, connection, and community. My graphic design business, once on the brink, flourished, now integrated into the estate's branding and marketing. One quiet Tuesday evening, after a successful corporate retreat had cleared out, Liam and I were walking through the gardens. The air was cool, scented with jasmine. He stopped by the ancient oak tree, the one I had initially found so daunting. He turned to me, his eyes gentle, and reached into his pocket. It wasn't a grand gesture, no kneeling, no audience. Just us, under the soft glow of the garden lights. He held out a small, simple wooden box. "Elara," he began, his voice steady. "I've built spaces all my life, but the only life I want to build now is with you." Inside the box was a ring, a beautiful, understated silver band, with a single, perfectly cut sapphire reflecting the twilight sky. It wasn't flashy or ostentatious. It was real. It was us. My heart swelled with a feeling far deeper and more profound than anything I had felt before. "Yes," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." A few weeks after our engagement, I saw Michael. He was walking out of a coffee shop downtown looking thinner, his shoulders more slumped than I remembered. He didn't see me. I overheard a fragment of conversation from a nearby table, something about Eleanor's recent legal troubles, a failed business venture, and Michael having to step in. There was no malice in my heart, no flicker of triumph, just a quiet awareness of how far I had come and how little their struggles affected me now. Their world, once so imposing, felt small and distant. My own world, built on resilience and genuine connection, felt vast and full. Liam and I married a year later, at the Rosewood estate. It was a small ceremony, intimate and filled with genuine laughter. The venue, once a symbol of my deepest pain, had become the foundation of my greatest joy. I stood there, looking at Liam, at our friends, at the thriving space we had created together. I wasn't the girl who wasn't good enough. I was a woman who had faced her humiliation head-on, who had risked everything, and who had, against all odds, built something beautiful from the ashes. I didn't get the wedding Eleanor planned, but I got the life I truly deserved. A life where I was seen, valued, and loved for exactly who I was, not for who someone else wanted me to be. And that, I realized, was the ultimate victory.